Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Sandra Turner, founder and host of the G&T Sessions podcast. Today we have an amazing guest, Mr. Étienne Garbugli. How are you, Étienne?
I'm very well. Yourself?
So where are you joining us from today?
Montreal, Canada.
Very nice, very exotic. Obviously, it's not as exotic as where I am. Because obviously now, as you can see, London's changed its landscape significantly since obviously last week.
Yeah, we have a little less palm trees here.
Now it's the summer, you see. It's amazing what happens. The beach, the sand comes out, there's palm trees come out, you see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it? It's pretty warm, I assume.
Yes, exactly. In fact, after this episode, I'm going to jump straight in the water, so you know.
Okay. Sorry to be keeping you out of the water.
It's good you have the cameras that scan down, otherwise you'll see me in my trunk, you see.
Oh, okay.
So thanks for coming on the show. I know it's taken us a while to get you on the show, because I know you're a busy boy, and we'll explain a bit later why you're so busy. Bit of an exclusive announcement a bit later. But it's great to have you here, so thanks for coming. And yeah, I mean, I think the one of the reasons why I was so keen to get you on the show is because I think some of the work you've done over the last 10 years in particular is, and I know you've done some more work as well in over the last few years that's even more interesting, as well as the evolution, is particularly relevant for today, and particularly relevant for, you know, organizations to look at. So I suppose as a kind of an intro to yourself, I mean, what gets you up in the morning? What's in Étienne's world at the moment?
So the main thing that gets me up in the morning is learning. So I think that's the connecting team in everything I do, pretty much personally and business, is just personal growth in terms of learning new things, just learning better what I know. So I've been for, I think, 15 years, pretty much, I've been monitoring how much I learn and like tracking how much I learn over time, just to be able to make sure that I'm always in a position of being maximally effective in terms of growth and learning. So that's really what I do. That's why I write books. That's why I do a lot of things that I do. I choose the opportunities that I choose.
And how do you measure that then? How do you measure learning?
So ever since, I think it's 2007, I started. So when the first time I actually went and I started my own business, I decided I'm going to start writing down everything I learned, which I've been doing since 2007. And that actually gives me metrics in terms of learning velocity. Okay. So I've been tracking that. So whenever I am in a position where I'm not learning as much or not learning as effectively as before, I do a switch. I'll change something. I will try to change the way I approach things. I will try to get a new job or something else. And it's been very effective in terms of always pushing the envelope, always pushing the boundaries that I've been, that you always kind of find yourself in if you're not really mindful of the limitations that you set on yourself.
But how do you? So I mean, that's a pretty impressive discipline. I mean, that's 13 years of what so you document everything that you learn. So you kind of write what you learn as a kind of like you kind of abstract it and see this is what I learned from this particular event or this.
Yeah. So like this specific
reading or this action or whatever.
Yeah.
Wow.
So every time I read a book, I decompile everything I get from the book, and every time when I meet new people, sometimes I will learn new things, and I will take that or things that I learn from people, but not things that they've actually said. So like when someone does something that's not good, I sometimes learn from that. So I think it's really key to like be mindful of that, and I just review that so I can actually always build off that to get to the next level. So
it's like you write your own synopsis of those kind of things.
Pretty much. So I grew up like my father used to take notes in every single book that he read, but like he would highlight things, and then he'd never be able to like refine like anything that he took notes of. So he's got like tons of books that he just doesn't know where the information is from. So I figure like I'm gonna one up that and just put everything together.
And so what do you do? So you digitize it, do you?
Yeah,
or do you write it? Pretty much. You receive it back. It's not. You don't write it in a journal. You do it actually. It's like a digital journal.
It's right now. It's like an Excel file, but like
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So also, because that allows me to get stats and things and just track different evolution. Plus, I track different parts of my life as well. So, for example, if I'm only learning about design, for example, like it means that I'm neglecting other parts of my growth.
Wow, that's impressive.
It probably will be like the topic of a future book.
So the trick, so yeah, I mean, so I suppose, so you've obviously mentioned that you've done books. You've done a couple of books so far, haven't you? I think, is that right?
Yes, and I'm in the process of finishing a third one.
Okay, which we'll talk about a bit later.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
The trigger, so the trigger that about your was this a concept called Lean B2B? Yeah.
Yes.
So what was the kind of the genesis? What was the hypothesis or the trigger for that? What was the epiphany moment?
Yeah. So if I take if I connect with the previous story, so I used to have a consulting company that was doing really well in Canada, and I was not learning very much because you end up doing the same thing all the time.
Okay.
And instead of continuing that, I decided, okay, so I'm going to actually move to Asia, get a new job, learn new things. So that's about when mobile was becoming more a bigger thing. So I figured like that might be one thing I want to learn. So I moved to Hong Kong.
Okay.
Ended up getting hired by a company called ThoughtWorks in Beijing.
Oh, ThoughtWorks. I know them well. Yeah. It's a great company. Great company.
Amazing company, but like they're in a lot of, like you were talking about testing, you're big into testing, like in things like that, for example, they're way ahead of a lot of other organizations.
Yeah.
So it was a really good learning experience. And at that time, like the whole design thinking, the whole business model generation, all that stuff was picking up.
Yeah.
As well as was the Lean Startup. But I was pre-launch of the Lean Startup. So the Lean Startup launched in 2011 and that was like 2010.
Yeah.
So I was keenly aware of the concepts, and I was also not stimulated enough. Maybe that I don't know if that's the right way to say it. So I was always thinking about like building new businesses and starting a new company, which is what I wanted to do. So I came back in 2011 to Canada. I started a B2b company called HireVoice, which was basically a set of tools to monitor employer brand monitoring. So a little bit like you have Radiant 6, for example, that does like social media monitoring for brands. We wanted to do the same thing, but for employer brands. And we started working on that. And
you mean like sentiment analysis for employer brands? Is that?
Yeah, that was like one of the models that we were also like serving of employees, which like different products have filled those needs, but we were hoping to build like a holistic approach that would kind of connect everything together, which was definitely too ambitious. But we were doing it with the Lean Startup approach. And
I would say, okay. So this is where the kind of B2B connection came then.
Exactly. So like the book came out in October. I think we started our business in October 2011. So we were early adopters of the approach. We were looking at the approach. We're trying to apply that. We're cold calling companies. We're doing all these things. And we ran into so many problems that we were like, okay, so we had these large organizations that were just like treating us like we were like we didn't understand the reality. We're trying to connect with the people in the organization. We're burning relationships. We were we're kind of like spinning our wheels on a lot of things. Like there's so much good stuff about the Lean Startup methodology, but a lot of the concepts in the book, a lot of things in the book are based on B2C businesses, because that a lot of the leading businesses back then were B2C companies. So that was a rude awakening. Like we kind of like figure out, okay, well, yes, there's a lot of things you need to adapt there, which we ended up doing. Like I ended up working with the MIT program for startups, kind of combining some of the concepts, and it worked a lot better for us. But ultimately, it didn't work out for the business. So I figured the best way for me to learn this was to write the book. So I ended up doing months and months of research, speaking to all these founders that had succeeded in B2B, trying to figure out like what was their validation model, what did they do that worked, what did they do that didn't work, and I ended up putting all that together into a book that's been doing pretty well since 2014.
Legendary.
Yeah. So it was a really interesting experience for me personally, and it's been amazing to see the results. Like there's companies, there's founders that I follow that have used the methodology, and now I have like 500 employees. Like that's the beauty of like seeing this, like seeing the evolution of this. And it's kind of taught me that I can be maximally useful through things like books, for example. So that's why I've been writing more books,
right?
Specifically, because I don't think there's another way where I could, like, consulting only gets used so far in terms of how many organizations you can change, or how many people you can do, you can work with. But books, for example, like I have organizations like in Pakistan that are using the book, and I find that just amazing personally, but also like I find that really, really great to be able to have an impact on the opportunities that people are getting in other parts of the world.
Well, it's also the thing. I think it's a point about a book. I mean, as you know, I'm kind of got one in the works, but I've got a few in the works, but they're not actually out yet. But this thing about when I think people say that the author gets has to learn it deep and wide. So you actually there's a lot of value for you. You have to be you actually are the domain expert in that area, and I suppose then becomes you become the key person of influence. You become the global expert on that particular that particular subject. So yeah,
I think that's if you do it well. Yeah, not everyone does that, but yes, that's the idea.
No, it's interesting because so back in 2007 to 2008, actually, I was in a restaurant in London with a gentleman called Roy Singham.
Yes.
Who you may know.
Yes, who is one of the smartest person I've ever met, and by a mile. Like when you speak to someone and like it's just like comes up. Like we had a few meetings with him in China, and it's just brilliant man.
Yes, exactly.
And now I think he's full-time. He's doing he's helping charities and protests around the world.
Yes, exactly. I mean, but he's yeah. I mean, I'll be honest with you. When I've heard about Apex Capital, I think it is, or so it's what a VC had bought ThoughtWorks recently, a couple of years ago. That was actually down at a meeting in their office in central London.
Okay.
And so one of the ThoughtWorkers was saying, "Oh yeah, we sold the company." You go, "What about where's Roy?" And he goes, "He's left." What?
Yeah.
He's like, because it was that the company was so much Roy. It was like
initially,
it was like the master plan of how the ideal company that Roy wanted to run and be part of.
Yes.
And just the spirit. I mean, some of the meetings that I've been to there. I mean, it was fantastic. You know, it's like.
But he was also able to hire, recruit, keep, retain people that were simply amazing as well. For example, like Martin Fowler works.
I know.
Like I find that like he didn't. Like I think he had a little bit of equity, but like not enough for you to think like, okay, well, he's actually a full-on partner. That's really and same thing. Like my boss is actually the CEO of my ex-boss is actually the CEO of ThoughtWorks now. And
the guy from China.
Yeah, Xiaoguo. And amazing person as well. Really, really smart person. And it's just eye for talent, capacity to motivate people and mobilize people. And ability to get these people to stay on board and be part of the mission of the organization. Yes. I think there's so much to learn there.
Yeah. No, I agree. Especially given that they were so far ahead of everybody else.
Enough that. Well, one of the internal stories is that they were getting annoyed by people leaving the organizations and then writing books about their methodologies, and then those people becoming really successful as influencers because of that.
Right.
Like, it's you came up with the methodology, and other people are just, I guess, monetizing it a little better.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was speaking to Dave Farley last week. You know, Dave Farley, Jess Humble and Dave Farley, who wrote the book Continuous Delivery. Yeah. So obviously Dave's they're both ThoughtWorkers as well. So, there's a big family of ThoughtWorkers out there. So fascinating.
Yeah, and there's a big family of them that are doing really well in terms of consulting and applying methodologies.
Interesting. That's great. I didn't realize that was some of your background. So when you talk about the your current projects, and you said you're just about to release a book, which we'll talk about in a second. But so how else does that occupy all your time, or what else do you actually get involved in these days? It sounds like you're doing not just one thing, you're doing multiple things.
I'm actually trying to be more focused in terms of doing a little bit less. I help a few organizations here and there, but the core thing that I'm doing is I'm preparing the new book that we're going to talk about, and preparing a few other books as well. So I'm actually working on a suite of books, a little bit, series of books.
Okay. Wow. It's in the audience, you see, with this builder. It's like a drum. It's like dry ice and disco ball. It's like drum roll.
Yeah, I know. We could actually bring it back every 30 seconds just to build it up.
To a hiatus.
Yeah.
The grand reveal. Mm-hmm. So I suppose, the question, so this is G&T Sessions podcast talking about growth and technology. Obviously, you talked a little bit about your tech experience, some of the triggers for actually some of your work you did a few years ago. But this thing, what was Étienne before that? So so how did you get to that point? Because some people obviously have got different personal growth stories that they've been through. That stage. I mean, what's that for you?
Starting from scratch, starting from the beginning.
I suppose So what people have explained before is about their kind of some things that happened in their earlier life that then start to shape what they did. Maybe the stuff about the parents, etc., and how that actually influenced them going forward. Or is that something that what's your personal story as a bit of a precursor?
Yeah.
So for example, you didn't just go from birth to joining ThoughtWorks. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Or maybe you'd actually related to racing and more closely. I don't know.
Maybe. Actually, one thing I realized a few years back, because it's always like hindsight 2020, is I'm actually very, very consistent, but in a way that other people than me would not see. Okay. Like if I look back, like what I used to do, like when I was a kid, I wanted to be an inventor, then an architect. So I would draw things that didn't make sense in terms of science for sure, but would be invention.
Right.
And then I got into architecture, figuring out and what I ended up doing afterwards in terms of my career has always kind of been that, coming up with new product, working on new innovations for organizations, setting up the groundwork of different things, from books, which are they're not architecture, but they're same thinking where you're looking at that holistic. It's that system thinking that's kind of been applied to everything. But I find it crazy how long it takes you as a person to figure out some of the patterns about yourself,
right,
that may be obvious to other people that have had similar stories, maybe, or should have been obvious, or because it's kind of the whole issue is you start your career, you have no idea what you're going to do with your life specifically. So you default to, which is kind of what I did. I defaulted to the career that my dad kind of had.
Right.
And then as you move forward, you realize this doesn't actually work for me, or this is not exactly what I want to do. And then you start poking holes in the, I guess, the model that you've been following, and figuring out okay, so what's a better model for me? And kind of putting that gradually.
What do you start, continue kind of thing? Yeah.
One of the things that became very clear for me a few years back is that we're at our most successful or happiest people when we're closer to what we actually are, what we really are. And that became quite a driving force for me. So I used to I could easily be doing what I was doing before, but I'm trying to get to that maximally closest to who I actually am as a person. My actual better position to provide value to the world and to other people.
Right. So like saying, what you want to do is have something that's got impact and is long lasting, and your example about, when you said, I think a bit earlier about your book being read by people in different countries, and then having, really taking it in and absorbing it, and then actioning that guidance.
Yes.
That's it's fulfilling, isn't it, I suppose? It's
100%. But it's all tiny experiments that were run over the course of a life that were okay, so is this a better way to provide this? Is this a better way to do this?
Yeah.
And then eventually you build up whatever product that you are as a person, and become through all this. I think it's all, I think you could apply the Lean Startup to personal growth, and that would definitely work.
Maybe that's another book.
Maybe.
Well, that's the thing, is because you see a lot of these books are on about how you become successful in business and what's the roadmap to become successful in business. But actually, there's this thing about what we're trying to, discuss and broaden out the discussion about, is there some patterns that you've developed in your personal life that actually helps you in your business life, and vice versa, because they become self-reinforcing. It becomes symbiotic, doesn't it? It becomes
yeah. But it's also like I find there's a lot of like automatic, automatism, like that people do. Like I will like not think of why you're doing this specific, you're taking this specific opportunity versus another one. And then you end up with a path that's not necessarily yours. It's kind of like a mix of things, and then you're trying to figure out backwards why you did these things and what's the emerging.
Yeah, you're trying to do a retrospective on it, aren't you, really?
Yeah, just being a little more strategic about that, like a little more mindful of like why I pick things and why I do things.
Or you read the Simon Sinek book, Start With Why, and it all becomes clear.
Yeah, I think that is that could be a long discussion.
It could be end with why. End with why. Oh yeah, we're right at the end now. We'll go back.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I mean, my father was in textiles, so he was in kind of from Yorkshire. He was a design director, so he used to design suitings for Marks and Spencers and all these like Gibbs and Hawkes and all these very famous Burberry and people like that. And he obviously the textile industry was in decline. Yeah. So when I started my career, I didn't have any option. I couldn't go into the textile industry, go in the opposite direction. But then I went into the kind of I suppose I went on it's called an NCC National Computing Centre in Manchester, and they were trying to encourage people to go into this thing called information technology, IT. Yeah, everybody's going, well, what are you doing that for, Andrew? Why are we doing that? And look at it now. Yeah, suddenly it's so kind of cool to be in technology. Yeah, what you mean you're not involved in a tech startup? You mean you're not doing X and Y and Z? It's I find quite amusing. It's new. It's like the new. How it switched. How this whole kind of attitude towards it has switched, and it's a lot more accessible now as well, which is good.
Yeah. But even there, like I find like the most interesting stories tend to be those when people like really have unique decisions where they pick things that are like very, very much like based on their personality or their own personal histories. Like that's one of the reasons why I love B2B, like is a lot of the knowledge that's required to be successful in B2B usually comes from nuggets that you got from very specific experience.
Right.
Like one of the organizations that I love, like in B2B, is a company called Loopio based in Toronto. And it's completely based, like they used to work at a company called Achievers. They figured out, they kept getting proposal requests. It took a lot of time. They figured out it's all these internal metrics that they got from this, and they figured out, okay, so this is an opportunity because of this. And then we got people that had the right skill sets. It's just very fascinating story because it's very, very unique, and it's not something you could come up with just by I don't know, doing like a business model canvas and thing like that. Because you wouldn't think about that. Yeah.
So they had a personal experience of a personal pain. Yeah. In a business context, which they said, there's a problem that needs solving here because it's the metrics are going the wrong way.
Yes.
Let's go and solve it.
Yeah. And they add everything, all the insights and all the visibility in what they needed to actually be successful.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So I suppose in your G story, yeah. So we talked about this concept of peaks and valleys.
Yeah.
So the peaks are obviously the things that kind of you had a plan, and it went really well, and you overachieved, and you're happy, smiley, and then there was things that maybe didn't go quite as well, and you maybe think, that's a learning.
Yeah.
So what would be some of the stories that you would share around those two kind of topics?
So a lot. There could be a lot there. Well, so just like the business that led to the writing of Lean B2B, that is a clear like failure as a business, creating a business and creating something that was meaningful, which is still a learning experience because there's companies that have succeeded in building what we were hoping to build. So there's a matter of timing there. There's a matter of the approach that we took. There's a matter of the market. There's a lot of things that can come out of that as learnings, and it led to a fairly good success, I think, in terms of running Lean B2B. Not all failures lead to success, and not all success needs to have failure that kind of bring them about, I guess. So I think, like, I often think about that. There's a great quote by Dave Meckler. I definitely don't know it by heart, but it's how great entrepreneurs learn from other people's mistakes. Like, good entrepreneurs learn from their own mistakes. Great entrepreneurs learn from other people's mistakes. I try to be in that last category as much as possible.
Right. Yeah.
So that's part of why I'm trying to unpack a lot of failures that are not necessarily mine as well.
Well, I suppose also with the research work that you do as well, you also find out the story behind the story.
Yeah.
You've got the kind of the paint job, that we know what do people paint the house, and actually then when you talk to the original source, you find out what really went on. Obviously, it depends on how much you share with the story, but then I think that's probably another interesting kind of piece of investigation.
Well, there was a great post on LinkedIn I read this week about how the person was talking about how founders should be more honest about the ending of their businesses and why they close their business, and not try to like put veneer on it and say like we sold when it didn't actually sell or anything like that. I do think like being honest with yourself is really important. And that kind of helps, like seeing the truth or understanding the real stories kind of give you a different perspective on the opportunities or what you should be doing.
Yeah, because the thing is, there's a bit of, I'm not taking this the wrong way, but I'm not trying to explain it the wrong way, but there's a bit of Hollywood about some of these, it's a bit like a movie, and it's a bit like the Social Network movie. It's, what really went on in Facebook.
Yeah.
And what did Hollywood's interpretation of Facebook, and then what went in the boardrooms, et cetera, because, people who watch that film have a view of Facebook anyway. And then they have a different view after watching that film. And then they have a different view based on some of the recent events that have happened in the last few years. So it's a bit, does that justify their perception? But then obviously, if you're in the boardroom, if you were Mark Zuckerberg or you were Dustin or one of the other, co-founders, then what really went on? Yeah. So it's all that kind of malarkey.
It's a great example as well, because like, would you do what was required of the organization, and like put in the same situation as Mark Zuckerberg, would you also like dilute your best friend out of the organization? It's also part of that. Like, there's people that have succeeded by doing things that were maybe not ethically what I would have done. And vice versa. Like, so there's a bunch of different stories like that, and understanding the context, understanding the story at a deeper level kind of gives you ideas of like, should I really admire this organization, or should I be worried about like I'm not a big fan of Google, for example, or a lot of the GAFAM actually like organizations.
You mean I call it the AGFA boys, the Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon.
Yeah. Like
what do you call it, Gandalf?
I think there's like 60 different, but one of them is GAFAM, like so Google, Amazon, Facebook,
Netflix.
Like it's questionable. I find that problematic. Like that people put Google on a pedestal. Like it's a great
I was just thinking that
it's
the pedestal problem, isn't it?
Yeah, and like people feel like they're winning at life when they get hired at Google, but it's easy to rationalize that like what the work you're doing is good, but is it? Like it's questionable. Like I'm really very much like one of the questions you had and the list that I saw was about threats for technology. I think the biggest one is like not enforcing antitrust laws. Like, cause you see it, like you look at, there's charts and graphs where you see like there's a decline in number of businesses started.
Right.
That can in part be attributed to this. There's also change in behavior in investors as well. That can probably be like, so it's the what will Amazon do? What will Google do? Like there's a lot of businesses.
I mean, literally yesterday, I think it's been a repost article, but the guys at CB Insights, which are a fantastic company and some really good work from those guys. They, basically it shows how basically Amazon have deconstructed the bank concept and reconstructed it in Amazon form. And you look at all the services, and it's like basically it's a bank, right? I only have admiration for a certain gentleman as well called Scott Galloway, who you probably have heard of as well.
Yeah.
Who some of his presentations and videos are to die for, because and his analogy of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. It's just like, I mean, he's ballsy to say the least. But
you do need those other point of views. Like a big thing that came out. I don't know if you've been following like Basecamp's new email service that's kind of challenging Gmail a little bit.
What's it called? Sorry?
It's like HEY.
Hey, what? Hey.com? Like hey.
Yeah, hey.com.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah. So they had a big battle with Apple about the fees that they charge for subscriptions when they're based in when the app is downloaded through the App Store. And it's good to have these alternative voices that are challenging these large organizations, because as a solo person, like it's very difficult to get your voice heard and like kind of be able to challenge these organizations. So there needs to be companies that hold these organizations accountable. But I
think just on that point, because you triggered me back a bit. If you think about it, if you think about these tech titans, right, they are bigger than some countries, right? The GDP, right?
Yeah.
And then because they are multinationals and global, operating in God knows how many tens of countries.
Yeah.
He's like a superpower. Like the governments.
Sure.
The governments are a national. Unless there's like a super government that like sits on top of the whole world, then who what's the hierarchy? Is it like the governments, and then it's actually the tech titans, and then it's God? Yeah. I mean, how's that work?
Yeah, there was this, I think it's John Oliver, this great episode about cigarette companies that are bullying like African countries, because like I think Philip Morris like is a bigger organization than like a lot of countries' GDP, and they're just like imposing laws on them and all these things, and it's just, that's not how it's supposed to be. Like it just doesn't work.
That was an interesting little interlude.
Yeah.
But you spot on. You spot on. I agree. I mean, I did a little tour in London with some of the tech titans officers, and I won't go through exactly what the experience was, but certain of the ones that we've talked about just now were not very friendly, put it that way. About actually being in their buildings, etc. So there's definitely an interesting dynamic going on there, but also some very good people working at those organizations. So there's some very top talent, and I think it's always that kind of what I observe with companies that are publicly listed, which a lot of these people are now, or they're on the way to be listed. That they have this, because of the VC model and the way that the things that sometimes get funded, it's this thirst for quarter growth, and it becomes relentless. And if you think about what's happened in 2020 so far, where we've had a massive downturn. So and I was just watching, just like the press and the media, they're just obsessed about putting good news stories out and about how everything's recovering back to the new normal. It's just like, is it all these decisions about COVID, are they all driven economically rather than for actually looking after people? So there's a bigger topic there. But
for sure.
It's interesting to see the behaviour of somebody sent me a meme saying that the press, is it the press or the media, is the virus, which is so but I don't want to get into that on this episode.
But it's also like a reflection of other things as well. Like it's kind of creation from, but like you said, different topic.
Yeah. So in terms of the T, so we talked about technology, and obviously you explained a little bit about your heritage. So did you just fall into that kind of area? How did you get involved in it? It sounds like you were kind of like quite in kind of what you call it, be curious. The kind of classic Steve Jobs quote.
Yeah.
It sounds like you were curious about the architect stuff, the invention stuff. Is that sort of
and I was kind of lucky. So my father used to work for a company called Bell in Canada, which is pretty large.
Right. Company. Okay. Yeah. The telco.
Telephone company, and he was in charge of acquiring new technology. So I got kind of lucky. Like in '92, I think I had internet at home, and so which is fairly early for Canadians. So I actually got into I used to play bass guitar, so I created my first website on GeoCities, like with bass tabs.
Right.
I used to do like some basic coding and all these things. So I got into it quite early, and I didn't actually think that was going to be a career or anything like that. But it just felt like the most. So I studied communications in university. So I was specifically I was doing writing soundtracks for that. That's kind of what I was doing, but I ended up getting hired in technology, so that kind of dragged me in that direction.
Okay.
But I was a little bit I guess ambivalent as far as what I was going to do afterwards. But I ended up starting in tech, ended up loving it, and kept going in that direction.
So that's quite you. So you're saying the kind of the exposure to that kind of innovation stuff was sound like it was that started triggering it. But then when you really get deep into it, then you didn't want to leave it. You got a kind of fascination with it.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say technology was as much of a thing back then. Like in the 80s. I don't think I think people looked at computers, and it was still this could be a toy, or this could be the future. I don't think it was as clear that things like computer were everyone is going to be working with a computer 20 years from there.
Yeah, everybody's going to have a device like this where they kind of it's like they're walking around with a personal computer that's more powerful than what they took to Mars, not to Mars, to the moon or whatever.
Yeah, which I find fascinating. It's in hindsight, it's obvious, but when you look at it, back then, we had I don't know, it just felt like my dad had bought a toy, and we had this Mac in the basement, and it's just I didn't see that this is going to be my future, or this is going to be the path for me, or whatever else.
Right.
It just felt like that's something fun to play with.
And you got a personal letter from Woz, something like that,
What, sir?
You got a personal letter from Woz, from Wozniak, saying, welcome to the Mac 2 or whatever.
Yeah. That's an interesting, the whole story with Apple is very interesting.
So in terms of what you're doing now and what you're doing in the future, obviously you talked about there was a trigger event on where you brought out your first book, and I presume B2B or Lean B2B was your first book, and then it seems to have kind of triggered you into, it's kind of like you got into it and you got into flow, and you kind of there's all this thing where people say, "Oh, I've got one book in me," but then it sounds like you've then got more books in you, and it's kind of triggered more and more of that kind of pattern. Yeah.
Well, I really wouldn't say that was more of a I've got to do this. I wanted to do this. I did it. And then seeing the evolution afterwards, I basically wrote the book, published a book, and then I moved on to doing other things.
Right.
Back then, which probably cost me some growth in terms of that book, and some visibility. You were talking about the book tour earlier. I didn't do that at all, which certainly limited its potential initially. But at the same time, as I saw it grow organically and saw that suddenly there were larger organizations that were getting into it, that I was getting good feedback left and right. It just became more and more of a thing in the back of my head.
Like a
And
snowball effect. It's kind of like start picking up momentum.
yeah. I think that's definitely like how books grow. Like it's word of mouth. Like initially you can get sales from other means for sure. But that's the core engine of growth of books, is like people reading the book and then telling other people about that book.
Have you done that? I mean, I suppose one of some of the people I've met before have done, they've created like online courses, and they created an academy, and they've created like signature talks. Have you done that, or have you thought about doing that? Or?
I have one on the Lean B2B website. I have a course. I have sub courses that are related to it, and I also sell the other books that I'm working on.
Okay.
So that's been another interesting way to bring knowledge to people and be able to go a little deeper in some topics that may not be maybe a little more niche.
So people learn in different ways, don't they? They consume information in different ways as well. So I suppose it's an opportunity to, repurpose the great content into different forms.
Yes. Definitely, that was definitely part of it, but also it's been expanded to. It's been a little bit a way to test the concepts that I'm bringing about in the second edition of Lean B2B.
So I suppose if we move the story forward, so I mean, you've obviously that's a few years ago that you went through that process, and obviously things as well. I don't know about you, but I feel like the rate of change seems to be, the flywheel seems to be getting faster and faster.
Well, I think that's actually the outcome of what I was mentioning earlier about, like, because a lot of people will stop learning at a certain age or will slow down in terms of learning, but by consciously trying to bring that back up, or bring that trend back up, I find that things start to compound more and more.
Right.
And then you have unique expertise or unique knowledge that you can apply in different ways. So a lot of the things we actually talked about in this call are things that I'm thinking about for future books.
Oh, really?
So,
okay.
Well, yeah,
encouraging.
but like, I think there's ways that, like, the more you learn, the more you get different unique expertise, the more you can connect the dots a little bit differently. I think that's partly what Elon Musk is saying, but it allows you just to be able to kind of view things differently, which is, I think, one of the great benefits of that.
Okay. Yeah. I think I mean, links to the future. So obviously you obviously are. You've got foots in different camps, yeah. But you're also obviously you've got this. I mean, if it's continuous everything, it sounds like continuous learning is a big theme in your life, yeah.
Yeah.
And also continuous sharing, yeah, because you're not just learning yourself, you're actually then publishing works that you're converting it from your brain cells into the page, and then you put it out there, and you're sharing the love, which is good, which is very fantastic.
Yeah.
What is? I mean, given we're in 2020, have you got any predictions for, what it's going to look like in 2025, 2030? Any thoughts on that? I mean, that could be for technology in general, or growth, and maybe some of the stuff that you found more around the stuff you've done recently around the B2B side. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So one of the insights from the past few years is that so there's this great research. I don't remember the person who did the research, but about like the most important factor in terms of startup success is actually timing, in a lot of ways. And that's one thing I've been trying to get better at, understanding timing of ideas, timing of concepts, industries. So that's one thing I've been really like trying to absorb in terms of figuring out, like, what are the trends that are coming up? What are the things that are coming up? Like, there's obviously been some very big one to see this year that they were accelerated, like the work from home, as we can both see.
Or work from anywhere, or work from the beach, is like in my case.
Yeah, which I think totally makes sense, but it will also destroy a lot of things. For example, like with my friends the other day, we were talking about how the city center is a concept that's probably going to get change, at least, if not be less relevant. And I think London is probably a good example of that.
Refactored.
Yeah, for sure. It may be more of a touristic hub than other things. So I think that's definitely going to change this. I think the way people view possessions is changing as well. Like, for example, ownership. like, I don't own a car. I don't intend to own one. I live in Airbnbs more or less. So I don't intend to.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, this is an Airbnb actually. And I appreciate the flexibility that I get from this, because it's just, it's easier. I think that's going to open up as well. Like a lot of
it's like I've got a new phrase for it. LAAS, life as a service.
Yeah. In a way. Yeah. Like, I think that's going to become more and more a thing. I think as well, challenging the way we grow, as like we're talking a little bit about growth in terms of endless growth. I think that's going to change as well. There's been interesting thoughts about, like, the premier of New Zealand, for example, has been talking about that. Like, this idea of, like, endlessly growing the economy is maybe not the right way to do it. So I don't know what's going to come after that, though. So I think there's a lot of changes, and I think people are getting more and more politicized. I think I am personally. So I think as well that might drive some more change that maybe requires.
Well, I think yeah. I mean, not to get too political on this episode today, but you know, it's really amplified the superpowers of various different governments.
Yeah.
Or not. So it's actually, if you put a league table of the you know, the highest performing government leadership teams versus, you know, other ones, then it'd be quite an interesting league table. And if you then index it to the GDP of the company, it'd be quite an interesting statistic, I think. So
but you see that as well, like it's the same kind of level of efficiency that you see in high performing startups. Like, why would you not expect that from government workers, for example?
Yeah.
I think the expectations are changing, and, like, the things that are blocking innovation hopefully will change as well.
Exactly. So in terms of, I mean, so it's something that's going to come out very, very soon. I think we need to do the grand reveal. So, you know, one of the things that you kind of sprung on me earlier, which I was quite pleased about actually, was this in the next few, literally in a few days.
Yes.
I mean, there's going to be something else in the Étienne world. So would you like to share with the audience?
Yes. So at the end of the month of July, I will be publishing a book called Solving Product, which is, I'm in a way, like, I'm a big fan of Jeffrey Moore's thinking about books.
All right, okay.
And he's been saying, like, I write a book whenever, and then I put everything I know in that book. And then when I learn other things, I end up writing another book. I think the same idea. So I'm kind of, like, I think one of the big things that I've been it's about learning. So how do you learn about your business? How do you figure out how to move it forward? How do you figure out how to unblock it to be able to get new growth? So that was the general idea behind the book that I'm putting together and that I'm going to be publishing. And the idea is that, so how do you figure out what are the gaps in your organizations, and how do you actually move things forward? So I interviewed 50 successful entrepreneurs and product leaders. I read countless books, and I put together a book that ended up being way bigger than what I anticipated. And it's basically, the idea is wherever you are in your business, it's going to show you how to move the business forward and grow your organization.
Okay. And who's the ideal reader, would you say?
Product teams and entrepreneurs specifically.
Okay. And at what stage? Is it every stage, or is
it's actually every stage? So that was something that grew. So the idea is it goes all the way from idea to maturity. So wherever you are, based on, so I look at an organization as a bit of a, so the analogy that
a living organism.
Yeah. So the way I look at it, like I compare it in the book, is based on painting. So for example, you look at a painting, you know which parts are done and which parts are not, but you never get that level of clarity with a business. So the idea of the book is to be able to give you that visibility in terms of what's solid in your organization and what needs to be improved. And then you get all the actionable advice to be able to implement.
Oh, I see. So if you're talking about the Carnegie Mellon stuff, the CMMI stuff, is it kind of like trying to say the maturity of your different elements of your business? Is that what you're trying to do?
The maturity of your different elements, and not the maturity of your business, which can be completely out of sync. like you meet founders, for example, they have a lot of customers, but they might not know why these customers buy or why these customers are getting their product in the first place. So it's a way to understand, like, so what are the gaps in your understanding of your market or your customers, and how do you address those specifically?
Okay, that sounds fantastic.
The way I explained the book definitely needs to get better, but it's getting there.
But practice makes perfect. Yeah. So
for sure.
So that's going to come out on the 6th, well, around the end of July. So it's not far away from today.
Exactly.
Well, so if anybody's listening to this episode or watching this episode, then the book will be out probably a few days after this episode gets published on the all normal channels.
Amazing.
So I mean, if people want to actually find that book for future reading reference, I presume it's going to be involved in like normal. You get it in hard copy and soft copy and all those different forms. What's the best way to find your book?
So you can go to solvingproduct.com.
Oh, you got the .com. Oh, nice.
I'm actually very surprised that I did, but or you can actually go on Amazon. It's also going to be listed on my other websites, so leanb2bbook.com or my personal website.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
The more people I speak to who are obviously highly successful authors means I'm actually going to have to get my finger out of my proverbial to get his mind.
And I'm happy to share any insights about the publishing process.
Oh, here we go. Etienne, I need some help. Please help me, please.
Well, you'll need to get up the beach first.
Oh, maybe I'll get more books done on the beach. Maybe. So I suppose in terms of today's session, I wasn't going to say, I mean, in terms of takeaways. So, because obviously, I mean, it sounds like you've got obviously some great stuff you put into your books that you've done already and the work you created already. If you were going to kind of summarize it into, the super synopsis of the super synopsis, what would be the that was interesting eye movement. What would be your kind of few takeaways around advice and guidance to people who are listening to this podcast, people who have come up with a great idea, people who wanted to go on that entrepreneurial journey, be a founder, be a co-founder.
Yeah.
What would be your gift back to them?
Well, I think you pointed one out earlier in this discussion about focusing on your superpower, whatever that is, and whatever, like, as you assemble a team as well, either do that strategically based on superpowers or figure out retroactively through the end with why thing, what the superpower of the team is because you're going to be, so things are getting, like, it's getting more and more difficult to be able to find a wedge in the market. So definitely, like, unique knowledge is a way to be able to get a foot in specifically.
Right.
So definitely for that, as a person and as an organization, focus on things that compound, are things that give you multiple in terms of the time spent. I think that's a very painful lesson that took me a long time to learn. And keep learning.
Oh, is that okay? So basically, what you're saying is identify. So do a bit of a self-audit, work out what your own superpowers are. I think that's the thing about the jigsaw puzzle analogy, isn't it? About how do you put together a team that actually covers all the areas that you need to have in your business operating model, or what you're doing at a service or a product offer. Yeah,
but at the same time, like, saying that it needs to cover all the points might be part of the challenge as well, because maybe there's something that's valuable out of a gap that you don't have, like within your, like, so for example, if you are if you don't have developers, for example, within your team, that might bring about different types of conclusions in terms of what are your expertise and what can be enabled from that team. That actually could be very powerful in terms of figuring it. Like, I wouldn't look at it negatively, like that you have gaps. I would try to see, like, is there something that this enables that's very specific to, that can be very successful.
It can be your kind of play to your strength and play to your kind of advantage. Yeah.
Yes.
That becomes that USP, that unique angle, basically. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, figure out that uniqueness. Focus on things that compound, so that give you more result than the investment that you put in. and keep testing and keep learning.
That's great. That's great. That's really good, because I think it's also sometimes you can, what you do is you kept it very succinct. Because, I think the work that you explained about how you've been codifying all your learning, that's a great actual outcome from this discussion as well, about, because that requires a lot of discipline, that requires a lot of, but then actually it's reinforcing as well, isn't it? So
yeah, but there's definitely like a certain, like I wouldn't say I'm the normal type of person.
Okay.
I would definitely say that that's like a weird personality trait.
I don't think you're weird. I don't think you're weird. I think you're good.
No. I just mean specifically that. Like I that's definitely like something that stems from me being a certain way like that.
Right.
I'm very like, I keep track of everything.
Well, it shows that you're very disciplined. It shows you're very disciplined to do that.
Yeah.
Which is a good trait, yeah. Because I think as your life gets more complex, you need to be more disciplined with your time. But the only thing we've got constraint about is time, really, isn't it? So it's how do you maximize time and get the most out of it and the most out of your life. So.
And then to that end, like I can confirm that it actually compounds. So like if time is the factor there, you actually will be making up that time in the end, because you are getting more value out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so if anybody wants to contact you after today's episode, what are the kind of where would they find you? Could you explain your how to contact you and how where to find like great value?
Yeah. So I'm Egarbugli, Garbugli at on all the social media. Otherwise, EtienneGarbugli.com, or you can go to leanb2bbook.com, or now solvingproduct.com.
Okay. You'd be buying all the .coms up at this rate. It'd be like a suite of product. It'd be like all these different websites with all these different products.
Yeah.
That's great.
I think there's still value in .com, but it might be changing in the future.
We see now it's books. You see, next to be movies.
I think that might actually be interesting.
Today Montreal, tomorrow Hollywood.
Yeah. But there's people that do that. Like they turn books into movies.
Well, never say never. Never say never.
Yeah, gotta be open.
I want to thank you for the episode today. And congratulations on the new book.
Thank you very much.
And I think anybody that's listening to this episode, I think I would highly recommend. I actually went through your book on Audible. Actually, it was the easiest way to get access to it. And obviously, you can bomb around and you can listen to the book, which is really good. So it's great that we can speak today, and great you could actually share your insights on what you've been through so far. And I look forward to things in the future.
My pleasure.
Let's catch up soon. So that was Étienne Garbugli live from Montreal, Canada. And the final question is gin. So we talked about this thing called, people think you see the G&T session about gin and tonic, and obviously secretly it is. So me and Étienne had a little bet on about what we'd do is we'd actually ask a question of Étienne. What is his favorite gin? And Étienne said,
Ungava gin, actually from the northern parts of Quebec. It is a gin made with, I think, a lichen, so like a tiny grass. So as a result of that, it's actually yellow. It's really, really good, really tasty, but I think it's difficult to find abroad.
It doesn't taste of lemons then?
No, it doesn't taste like a lemon at all.
And is it alcoholic?
Oh yeah, I think it might be 40, 35.
Oh wow.
Yeah, 40.
So you said it's called Ungava,
which is the one in the bay in northern Quebec.
Okay. And is that little distillery north of Quebec then, not far from where you?
Yeah.
And why do you pick that one?
Just different taste a little bit. So it tastes a little bit different in terms of the gin itself. It's also a very interesting presentation. It always catches people's attention.
So quite striking, isn't it, with the yellow? Yeah.
Yeah, but like it's a shade of yellow that's a little bit uncommon as well for alcohol at least. So definitely that. Plus, it's got an interesting story. It's an interesting alcohol.
Well, I look forward to being, socially distanced, obviously without masks on, drinking gin and tonics with you somewhere in the future.
Yeah, likewise.
So if I'm ever in Montreal and if you're ever in London,
Perfect.
Once the air travel comes back, then
yeah.
We'll have to make sure. I'll try out. I'll try and find it in London actually. No, thank you for that. That was an interesting little end to the episode. Little surprise for everybody there. So Etienne was recommending Ungava gin from Quebec Quebec in Canada. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you heard it here first.
And don't forget the spray tan for the beach.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, like you say, I always go like a lobster anyway. So I'll be. You definitely see me walking down the beach. I'll be the guy, the red guy, not the brown guy.
Perfect. That works.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day, and see you soon. Thanks very much, Etienne.
Thank you very much.
Take care.